My name is Sophia Johnson. I'm 29, and for the first time in years, I began to feel that love and fear could coexist in the same room. When I met Charles, everything seemed predictable and safe. Our life together started gently: Saturday morning coffees, Sunday walks, the quiet intimacy of shared routines. But over the last 6 months, the pattern shifted. Little cracks became fissures. Fissures became chasms. And by the time I realized what I was truly living with, I had been quietly documenting the storm raging behind the smile I once adored. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Charles would lose his temper over the smallest things: a misplaced coffee mug, the wrong brand of almond milk, or a stray sock left on the floor. At first, I laughed it off. I told myself he was just stressed at work, that everyone had bad days. But then came the throes: a ceramic mug near my head, a picture frame that crashed against the wall. The first time, my heart raced so violently I couldn't breathe. "It's just anger," I whispered to myself. "He didn't mean it." But deep down, I knew the truth. Intent is irrel charlist when someone is throwing objects at you. Charles's aggression wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was verbal, sharp, and cutting, leaving marks invisible to the eye but heavy on the chest. He would whisper things I could barely hear over my own heartbeat, accusations thinly disguised as concern. "You think you can leave me? You'll regret it. Everyone will believe I'm the victim." I froze the first time he said it. Victim? Of what? The words lingered, insidious, twisting themselves around my nerves. I tried to reason, to negotiate, to smile through the tension, but nothing softened him. His temper flared faster, harder. A casual comment about dinner could ignite rage. And yet, the love I had felt, the warmth of our early mornings, made it hard to see the pattern clearly. I kept telling myself, it's not him, it's just the stress. I can fix this. I can help him. But help, I learned, is a trap when wielded against someone unwilling to see themselves. The first night I truly feared for my safety, I was folding laundry. Charles had returned from work, the kind of dark look settling over him that made the air feel electric. He glanced at the pile of clothes, shrugged, and tossed a ceramic mug, not toward me, not exactly, but close enough to make me duck. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I backed into the corner, holding my breath, my mind racing. This isn't right. This isn't love. I spent hours after that night replaying every detail, trying to rationalize, trying to justify staying. And then came the bruises, or what he would later claim as bruises. Faint, almost imperceptible, on his forearms, his shoulders. "From the gym," he said casually, flexing to prove the point. And yet, the seed of fear he planted, the one about him telling everyone I was abusive, had already taken root in my chest. 3 weeks ago, I found the courage to speak the words I had rehearsed for nights. "Charles, I can't do this anymore. You need to leave." I thought he would argue, perhaps sulk, maybe beg, but instead he laughed. Not a soft chuckle, not even a polite, nervous laugh. It was a sharp, cutting laugh, echoing with malice. "You can't leave me, Sophia. I'll destroy you." I froze, my heart sinking. What did he mean? "I've already told everyone you hit me. Friends, family, coworkers. No one will believe you." I shook my head in disbelief. I, 27, standing in my own living room, was being threatened for the crime of existing alongside a man who claimed victimhood. "What bruises? Where did they come from?" I asked cautiously, my mind racing. He showed me his phone. Pictures of faint, carefully staged marks on his arms and legs. "Recent," he insisted. Photos, he said, proved I had hurt him. And in that moment, I understood the stakes. This was no longer about love. It was about survival. I nodded slowly, carefully, hiding my panic behind calm. He's dangerous, but I can be smarter. That night, I lay awake while he slept, listening to the slow rise and fall of his chest, thinking through every detail I could remember, every object, every word, every subtle threat. I had installed hidden cameras months earlier, citing security after a neighbor's break-in. They were inconspicuous, blending into the smoke detectors. Now, in my mind, they were my silent allies. Tomorrow I will act. Tomorrow I will set boundaries. Tomorrow I will begin reclaiming my life. But I also knew this. When Charles realized I was not afraid, when he understood that control could slip from his fingers, he would escalate. The fear that had once been a distant whisper now had a name: Charles. and the game had just begun. The next morning, the apartment felt smaller, heavier. Charles moved around as if nothing had happened, making coffee, scrolling through his phone. But I saw it. The glint in his eye, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands twitched whenever I entered the room. I had learned to read him like a ledger of threats. Every glance, every muttered word, every casual touch carried weight. I sat at the kitchen table, a pen in hand, pretending to make notes for work, while my mind was cataloging every small cruelty, every manipulative smirk. He's counting on me to stay silent. He's counting on me to be afraid. But I had other plans. Quietly, carefully, I began recording, not just the moments of anger, but the patterns, the escalation, the threats. My cameras were capturing everything. The smirk when he claimed I was the abuser, the way he staged his bruises, the subtle intimidation that left my chest tight. It wasn't long before he decided to escalate. He pulled out his phone one evening, swiping through photos, and showed me the faint and staged bruises on his arms again. "See this?" he said, his voice deceptively casual. "Everyone's going to believe this. I told Clara I'd been hurt, and she's on my side. Who's going to think I'm lying?" Clara, Charles's ex-girlfriend. Her name felt like a second knife. She wasn't malicious, at least not yet, but she was drawn into Charles's twisted narrative. He framed her as a witness to his suffering, someone who could validate his lies if needed. I caught her in fleeting social media posts, innocently commenting on his stories, unaware of the danger, but I knew how easy it would be for him to manipulate her perception. For weeks I remained calm, hiding my fear behind a veneer of normalcy. He would toss objects, shout, make casual threats, and I would document, catalog, and breathe through the panic. Each incident was a brick in the foundation I was building for my own defense. It was exhausting, terrifying, and yet empowering. There was a rhythm to it now. I was no longer just reacting, I was preparing. One night, he pushed too far. I had been packing a few things in preparation for his departure, a slow, deliberate test of boundaries. "You can't kick me out," he sneered, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just erase me from your life? I'll ruin you. Everyone will believe I'm the victim." I stopped. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to beg, to apologize. But something inside me, a spark I hadn't felt in months, held me still. "Then we'll see who the victim is," I said softly, almost to myself. That evening, the escalation came. Charles's control faltered as I refused to bend. He hurled insults, grabbed objects, shoved doors, all while claiming I was the abuser. Nails scraped across my arm in a chaotic frenzy, and yet I never retaliated. I moved carefully, shielding myself, making sure the cameras captured every moment. His rage was loud, his threats blistering, but it was now being documented with clarity he could not anticipate. After he left the room in a huff, I sat on the floor, trembling, replaying every word, every motion. The apartment smelled of burnt coffee and fear, yet within me, a strange calm had begun to settle. I am not powerless. I am not the monster in this story. I see everything now. The next day, I began quietly preparing for what I knew was inevitable. Charles would try to spin the narrative publicly. He would tell friends, coworkers, even Clara, that I was violent, manipulative, and unstable, and he would believe, or want to believe, that no one could contradict him. I made copies of the footage, labeled by date, backed up to the cloud and external drives. I recorded phone calls when he threatened to involve friends or the media. I even documented casual comments he made to Clara, subtly poisoning her perception of me. All of it was a chess game. Every threat he made, every lie he told, became a potential checkmate. And then came the night he truly crossed the line. I had told him it was over. He would have to leave. I had arranged movers for his belongings, set deadlines, and fortified my resolve. When I told him, the apartment became a battleground. He raged like a storm, striking, scratching, and screaming. Nails against skin, fists flailing, and words that cut deeper than any physical blow. "You're pathetic. You'll regret this. I'll ruin you." I did not fight back. I moved defensively, calmly, letting the cameras record every motion. He was blind to the evidence we were making. By the time he collapsed into exhausted fury, the apartment was a testament to his breakdown and to my restraint. I sat among the chaos, heart racing, and whispered to myself, "This is the moment everything changes, the moment he finally meets consequences." And yet, the hardest part was still ahead, navigating the world outside these walls, where Charles's lies had already begun to seep, and where Clara and everyone else might believe his story before mine. The web he had spun was far-reaching, but for the first time I could see the threads clearly, and I had a plan to untangle them, thread by thread. The morning after the attack, the apartment felt eerily quiet, like the calm before a storm that had already begun. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, my laptop open, headphones in, reviewing the footage from the hidden cameras. Every moment, every hissed threat, every flailing hand, every staged bruise, all of it was there in crystal clear HD. Charles had thought the cameras were smoke detectors. He didn't know they recorded everything. And now, for the first time, I felt a measure of control. I knew what he would do. I could almost hear him rehearsing in his mind. The Facebook posts, the whispered confessions to friends, the casual claims to Clara that I was unstable, dangerous, and violent. He wanted the world to see me as the abuser, but I had proof to turn the narrative completely. Proof that spoke louder than words, louder than rumors, louder than fear. I consulted a lawyer before taking the first step. She told me what I had already begun to understand instinctively. Evidence was my shield. Documented, time-stamped, irrefutable evidence could not only protect me legally, but also blunt the weapon Charles was preparing for me socially. The restraining order came quickly. Charles was served at his gym in front of his workout class, and his face turned pale as he read the papers. He tried to argue, to charm, to gaslight, but the legal system had no patience for violence documented on camera. The order was immediate, granting me protection and establishing a timeline of his aggression. And then came the social battle. Charles launched his smear campaign with meticulous cruelty. Photos of his bruises, screenshots of manipulated texts, and false claims of abuse circulated among our friends, coworkers, and even casual acquaintances. I watched from the quiet of my apartment as the storm gathered on social media. But I stayed calm, carefully documenting every post, every share, every comment. I was not retaliating. I was recording, preparing, and waiting. By day 3, the police came to verify the claims. I invited them in, heart steady, and showed them the footage. Every incident, every threat, every staged bruise, all captured in high definition. The officers watched silently, absorbing the evidence, and for the first time, I felt a shift in the air. I was no longer the potential villain in this story. The truth was finally on my side. Clara's role in Charles's manipulations began to unravel. She had been pulled into his narrative, convinced for a moment that he was the victim. But the evidence I had captured showed otherwise. Him throwing objects, screaming, threatening, manipulating. Clara began to question everything she had believed. Subtle messages, hesitant questions, glimpses of doubt, all of it indicated that Charles's control over perception was slipping. I posted carefully selected clips on social media. One showed him admitting he had staged the bruises. Another captured him hurling a ceramic mug during an argument. The third showed the final night of his attack, the one that had almost broken me. I wrote nothing vindictive, nothing reactive, just the truth, with subtitles for clarity, timestamps for verification. The response was immediate. Friends began reaching out with apologies, confusion, and shock. Mutual acquaintances who had once believed his lies now saw the pattern clearly. Clara deleted some of her comments, hesitated in her posts, unsure how to proceed. Even Charles's allies were forced to reckon with the visual evidence. But the real battle was only beginning. Charles tried to escalate legally, filing false reports claiming harassment. I presented the footage, the documentation, and the record of his threats. The police explained calmly, video evidence of assault is not harassment. False claims carry consequences. He was stunned. I could see the disbelief flicker across his face, a rare crack in the armor of control he had wielded for so long. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Charles's professional life began to unravel. Social media influencers, who had once amplified his narrative, withdrew support, issuing statements apologizing for spreading misinformation. His workplace launched internal investigations, ultimately reaffirming my integrity while implementing stricter protocols for handling abuse allegations. And all the while, I felt the first stirrings of relief. Relief tinged with exhaustion, certainly, but also empowerment. I had endured, documented, strategized, and now, with evidence in hand, I could reclaim my life. I realized that surviving the storm was only part of the journey. Thriving afterward required careful navigation, patience, and a clear sense of self-worth. In quiet moments, I reflected on how close I had come to being crushed under Charles's lies. The psychological toll had been immense: sleepless nights, self-doubt, fear of public shaming. But the calm clarity that comes from truth, law, and evidence was a balm. I was no longer trapped in his narrative. I could write my own. By the end of this part of the story, I began to sense that a new chapter was possible, a chapter where respect, kindness, and genuine love could replace fear, control, and manipulation. But that chapter, I knew, would not arrive immediately. The final reckoning was still to come. The first morning after the restraining order was granted, the apartment felt lighter, almost impossibly quiet. For months, the air had carried tension like static electricity, a constant hum of fear and anticipation. Now I could breathe. Really breathe. Every sound, traffic outside, the hum of the fridge, the distant laughter of neighbors, was a reminder that my life was, finally, my own. Charles faced the consequences he had so long evaded. Legal action resulted in probation, mandatory anger management, community service, and a permanent restraining order. The staged bruises, the attacks, the threats, all of it documented on camera, had left him exposed. Socially, too, his world crumbled. Former friends withdrew support. His online narrative collapsed under the weight of undeniable evidence, and Clara, once a hesitant ally, distanced herself entirely, no longer willing to be complicit. I watched the process unfold with a strange mixture of relief and incredulity. The man I had once loved, once thought gentle, was now forced to confront his own actions publicly. But the satisfaction was not vindictive. It was practical, measured, and deeply cathartic. I had survived his lies, his manipulation, and his aggression, and I had done so with integrity. The days that followed were quiet, but intentional. I immersed myself in therapy, untangling the knots of fear, self-doubt, and shame that Charles's control had left behind. I learned to recognize the signs of manipulation, to trust my instincts again, and to embrace the quiet power of documenting, preparing, and asserting boundaries. I discovered that resilience is not loud or flashy. It is steady, deliberate, and sometimes hidden behind a calm exterior. And then came a gentler, unexpected chapter. I met Liam through a board game group, a chance encounter that felt almost cinematic in its simplicity. Unlike Charles, Liam's presence was soothing, unassuming, and steady. When I shared fragments of my past, he listened without judgment, without fear, without the need to assert control. There was no flinch at my scars, no questions about why I didn't leave sooner, just acceptance. His kindness was almost revolutionary. He didn't throw objects when frustrated, didn't manipulate perception, didn't demand control. He simply existed, and in his existence, I found comfort. With Liam, I learned to reclaim ordinary joys, the subtle warmth of a hand held during a stressful day, the unspoken trust of shared silence, the exhilaration of laughter that isn't tinged with fear. It felt radical, almost forbidden after months of navigating Charles's storm. I realized that healing wasn't just about surviving abuse. It was about learning to believe in love that isn't transactional, manipulative, or terrifying. Meanwhile, Charles's life outside the courtrooms and social media unfolded in parallel tragedy. His professional reputation was shattered. Yoga studios and social circles he had once controlled rejected him. Clara's distancing and the weight of public scrutiny left him isolated. Social media accounts deleted. GoFundMe campaigns removed. Former friends silent. His world had become a mirror of the chaos he had tried to inflict on me. I observed this with a steady heart, neither gloating nor fearful. What mattered was the lessons I had carried forward. Document everything, no matter how small it seems. Evidence is survival. Never tolerate aggression disguised as passion or stress. Boundaries save lives. Control, threats, and manipulation reveal themselves over time. Trust your instincts. Healing requires space, patience, and the courage to embrace kindness where abuse once existed. Months later, standing in the sunlit kitchen of my new apartment with Liam by my side, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't known I could achieve. The trauma of the past 6 months still lingered, a shadow at the edges of my consciousness, but it no longer defined me. I had reclaimed my life, my narrative, and my voice. Charles was a chapter closed, a storm weathered. Liam represented possibility, quiet, gentle, steadfast love. And I, Sophia Johnson, 27, survivor, witness, and now a woman empowered by truth and resilience, finally allowed myself to exhale. The cameras, still backed up in multiple secure locations, remained a silent testament, not to revenge, not to fear, but to foresight, preparation, and survival. And as I placed my hand in Liam's, feeling the warmth and reassurance of another human being unafraid of my past, I understood. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a new beginning had arrived.